Ani and bonjour. This is Heather from the Ouija no Kiwag Working Together program. I am so excited to be here for another episode of our Voices of Change Threads of the Future speaker series, collaboration that we've created here. For most of you, you know that the Ouija no Kiwag program is a program that is offered to mainstream organizations to help them build safer environments for Indigenous peoples to come and seek help and connection and support from a culturally safe space. We know in this area that we've got a lot of work to do in that. And it's because of all of those trainings over the last year that you all, the viewers, said, I want more. I want to learn more. I want to hear more. I want to connect more. And I want to understand more. So I'm very fortunate to be here today with someone I consider such a great ally, friend, Quay, and collaborator, and we're going to dig into that a little bit more here. But when I was putting together the concept of how to express and share and build our container of collaboration as a community, I knew in my head right off the top that I needed to have Jill here with me because she's done such amazing work. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to Jillian Morrison. Morrison, why did I say that? Jillian Morris, because Jill has, man, we're going to talk about it, but Jill has done so many things. And I met Jill 5 years ago. And it was a chance meeting where our paths crossed to do a community project for the town of Collingwood. And it was in that moment that Jill witnessed my soul and I witnessed Jill's soul. And we're going to speak to that a little bit more. So Jill, hello, welcome. Thank you for taking the time here today with all of us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really, really humbled to be asked to be here. So I'm grateful.
Oh, thank you so very much. We're going to start this right off the hop, and I'm going to just open it up and say, who's Jillian Morris? Who is Jillian? So that we can let everybody know.
Well, I'll do my best. I'm still learning. Yeah. So well, let me, I guess, start by introducing you the best I can in my language, because I am, like so many, reclaiming that as well. So Jillian Gitz, Morris de Waxanazare, Ganigahaga, Waganyato, Suego, Nidiwageno. So I just told you that I am Ganigahaga, which is our word for who we are. We're also referred to as Mohawk, not our name for ourselves. And I am part of the Haudenosaunee people. And I come from Six Nations. I'm a band member of Six Nations, which is Southern Ontario. And I've been in Collingwood for about 6 years, I guess now, and Simcoe County for about 12 years. So I really feel quite rooted in this area, but of course, Six Nations is always going to be home to me. But yeah, I've come here and I found new communities, I found new families and things like that. So it's been really good. So I feel like this is a huge part of my journey, and who I am is where I'm at this time. So so I guess thinking about who I am, and as I know, and I think some other people who have been a part of this project know of feather carriers and that aspect of my life. And so I took feather carriers. I was a board member. I'm now a teacher of feather carriers. And so it's been a big part of me understanding who I am. But I think when I think about that and go back, it's, we talk about where we come from, right? And that's really a big part of how we understand who we are. So I do that. And that I can go all the way back to the creation story, my creation story, and see the beginnings of who I am. But also, being connected to community and Six Nations and all of the ancestors who came there from there. All four of my grandparents were born and raised on Six Nations. Both my parents were born and raised on Six Nations. When I was growing up, my dad was actually an OPP officer, but prior to that, he was in the police service, in different police services prior to OPP as well. So I was actually born in Calgary. So I have that piece of me too. That piece of my creation story is very important to me. So I think about the mountains, and I think about that sort of aspect of my life too, and how I come from that place as well. So there's a lot there. There's so much to unpack in just place, thinking about place. But yeah, home for me is still Six Nations. It's always going to be a ton. Most of my family's there. Both sides of my family are from there. And so I often have to go back to those lands in order to reground and to find that sense of belonging, although I am finding a little bit of that in other places as well, here in Collingwood being one of them. And so, yeah, who I am is unfortunately, so complex and it was for so long. I think about identity a lot, but growing up on reserve, I think partially because my dad was OPP, we did move around, and I didn't move to the reserve until I was about 12, something like that. And so I always knew I was Indigenous. I always knew where I came from, but there was this part, of course, that I wasn't embedded in the culture. I wasn't raised that way. And so when I moved to reserve, there was a lot of like uncertainty about who I was. And a lot of pushback, and especially my dad being OPP. OPP and Indigenous communities don't exactly mesh too well. And so I think I ended up getting a lot of bullying or pushback from peers because of those choices. And I think too, this look at my family, and we looked like the sellouts, right? The ones that bought into this idea of assimilation. And so being raised in that way, and then growing up and understanding things and having to come back to culture and learn on my own later on in life, was very challenging, because I think I had to too. I bought into this idea of what success looks like from a Western standpoint versus understanding that, there was a lot of gifts that come from our culture and come from who we are inherently as Indigenous people. And so I had to learn that later on. So I did, and I continue to learn that. But yeah, there's a lot of things that happened along the way that have helped me try to find that answer of who I am. And like I say, I'm still on that journey, still going down that road. So I know a lot of Indigenous people understand this, that we really are we're being pulled by both worlds constantly. And it's tough, and it's hard to navigate. And it's only, I'm into my 40s now, and realizing only now that I have the strength to get through this, and I do have the capacity to, and the gifts that I need to carry me forward. But yeah, it's been a long journey. So that's a little bit about who I am, but I mean, that's there's a lot more to it.
Oh, Jill, and thank you for sharing that. And some of the key points in there, that I know that we talk about inside of our regional keyword program, just by, the program is a cultural awareness and education program, but it's truly grown into this container of unpacking, of identifying, acknowledging, and learning. And I really appreciate the fact that you brought up that, within moving back to the reserve, you were actually veered by your peers, your community, as buying into that whole assimilation process, right? And that's something that I as a two-eyed seer every day, and you growing up in the Western world as well as having those practices, so that we're constantly trying to navigate this inner, I call it the slip and slide of how am I being appropriate? Am I honoring both pieces of myself? But clearly, the identity piece that I think a lot of us wrestle and struggle with in the beginning is that we just don't know who we are because we've got both of these things batting up against each other. And the moment that we can get to that place where we understand and realize that there's beauty in both of these things and we can bring them together and make them work for us, instead of having this resistance. Now, again, that's impacted by our family cycle, by our community, and where we are and what those views are. And again, being impacted by how this generational trauma has impacted our whole entire world from that seed core event that happened so many years ago. So thank you for bringing that understanding and that awareness. And I can only imagine how, uncomfortable it must have felt at times, outside of your skin as well as inside of your skin, trying to figure out who, like, again, we talk about, and I often say with peers, that for years I spent time only showing pieces of myself because that was the only safe way that I thought that I could navigate. I'm proud to say that now, I authentically show up with all my pieces, whether they're together or not. And I make a conscious effort every day to make sure that when I'm doing that, I'm bringing all those pieces with me. I'm not leaving anything outside the door. And I think that even, the Western side of me could probably, use this as an example too. Like, how many of us are walking around and putting on masks of illusion of who we are and what we are, right? So that's what I love about our culture, is that when you get to that place of understanding identity and knowing and belonging and purpose, you really realize I'm a magnitude of different colors and sparkles and gifts, and I need to bring all that forward. So miigwech for bringing that up and bringing that awareness to it. I appreciate that. You mentioned that you were Haudenosaunee. I would like to talk to that a little bit because
Sure.
here in our area, we often say this is coming from our teachings of Anishinaabe, and we want everyone to know and to become aware of that there are so many of us. There's a diversity in all of us that is here in this area and showing up. There's not just one type, one kind, one tradition, one culture, one ways of knowing. It's a magnitude of great ways of knowing and teachings that are available. So if you would speak to that. And then I also heard you say you had your own name, which was Mohawk was not the name that you were given or would call that was the name you're given. So if you would speak to that a little bit, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, so I don't know the history of that like for certain, but what I've understood is that I believe it was the Algonquin gave us the term Mohawk. Probably not Mohawk specifically. That was probably anglicized, but and I think it means something. It speaks to the brutality of who we were, and who we were perceived to be.
Let's get that straight.
Yeah. Yes. And so I can't remember exactly how it translated, but it was something related to that, where Ganigahaga, which is our word for ourselves, means people of the flint.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. All right.
Yeah, and then Haudenosaunee means people who build longhouses.
Okay.
Yeah. So speaking to the Haudenosaunee culture is like, I mean, that's big in itself too, right? So, so we do. I mean, when you talk about people of the longhouse, that's, that is where we go. I think, if you were going to look at the counterpart with Anishinaabe people, you would think about the Medewan, something like that, the lodge, right? So, and we do. It's a physical space that we can go to. I am not longhouse, so I'll just be clear about that as well. There's a lot of Christianity on Six Nations. A lot of conversion happened, of course, back at the time of colonization and the reserve system being put in place. And so a lot of our community, I wouldn't venture to guess, but I don't know, maybe there's, a good 40% that still continue to be kind of divided in that way. And then, of course, that created a lot of division in our community. And so that division still exists today. So with the Haudenosaunee culture there, so there's longhouse, and then, all of those ceremonies and things like that. We have midwinter ceremonies and these things. But yeah, because I wasn't raised in a longhouse, I didn't carry a lot of those ceremonies and those kinds of things. So my experience going to longhouse has unfortunately been funerals.
Yeah.
And so that's where I've gotten that kind of look into what that actually looks like. And of course, that's a very different type of ceremony as well. So,
So I have a question that comes up often inside of the program. So as we're honoring each, individual community in our area, for example, when we gather together, we will enter in from Anishinaabe from the eastern doorway. I know that you enter in a different way. I wasn't aware of that until I was sitting in circle and community with fellow Indigenous peoples, and I wondered why that was different, right? Because as you're learning to reconnect and you're coming together, there are just certain ways in which we do things differently. And that's the important piece that I want, our mainstream organizations to be aware of, that, inside the Wijinukiwag program, I'm teaching you the Anishinaabe, ways of being and motion inside of, we use the medicine wheel. As an example, right? But just learning and understanding that there's so many that it can be different, that wheel can shift in animals, it can shift in colors, it can shift in ways of being, life, cycles, all of those things. So yeah.
So we move counterclockwise.
Okay.
Within the circle. Yes, absolutely. And that's so my teachings around that is that comes from the creation story. And so when Sky Woman falls down and she's placed on the back of the turtle, and the muskrat finally brings soil up from underneath the waters, the soil is placed on the back of the turtle. She starts dancing in a counterclockwise manner, and as she's creating Turtle Island, she's dancing counterclockwise, and therefore we understand that that's the cycle that we move in, is that counterclockwise cycle. And then there's the simple notion too, that this, with the idea that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, we're moving in this counterclockwise manner, right? So that's my teachings around why we go in a different direction. But yeah.
And that's, thank you for that. And for all of you looking and watching out there, that is what we call inside the program, the writer downer. So just so that you're aware that there are different things that happen, and it's all, just this beautiful piece to explore, to honor, and to hold space of collaboration and connection. And it does reflect to our varying creation stories. Because across our communities, our creation stories are different. And there's not just one, and there's not a wrong or a right. It's an all. Absolutely. Right? So again, writer downer for all you people out there.
And we're very, very proud of our smoke dancers.
Okay.
So from our community, we have smoke dancing, and it's We have all dances, just like, we've adopted the powwow dances, just like so many of our communities. But the smoke dance kind of, those are the ones that come out of like our
Can you share that
costume.
with us?
I don't have the teachings around the smoke dance, but it's a very fast feet moving dance, and it's a really cool. And so when the smoke dancers come out and they play the big drum, it's a very fast beat, and the feet are just moving, and it looks beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah. So I'm
Okay,
sure if
well,
people wanted to check it out on YouTube or something, you could probably look it up and just see what that dance looks like. But it's it's pretty cool.
and I look forward to the day when we can come together. This is a shout out to our mutual friend Jeff Springwater, that we can all come together and really expand and grow and learn and see and experience and hold space and honor and witness all of these things together as one. Um, yeah, I look forward to that very much. So, where I would like to go next is kind of the why. And I believe, that there is a why to everything that we do. For most people inside of my program, they learn my why, why I created the program and why it's so important to move this forward, and looking at it through that trauma lens of experience. What people may not know is that you and I, we got called to do a Orange Shirt Day celebration here in Collingwood in our hometown. And we met, and we were basically just getting to know each other. The town facilitated Tanya. The town was amazing, and such an ally and collaborative. Facilitated this coming together of the two of us to bring forth, a conversation for the youth in our area. And what we didn't know and what we learned that day is that you and I share a mutual loss in our story. And it happened at a pivotal time for me. I had just lost my baby sister 5 years ago. And here you were, right there. And you said to me, Heather, we need to check out the Feather Carriers program. And I was like, what is that? I had started my quest, and I was in my grief, and I was in all of these things. And then we got to talking, and you told me about your story, about your own loss within your family. And so I hold that as a sacred space in my heart with you, that the two of us were able to come together in this place of grief and loss, to really transform it in a way that we make sure that we're opening doorways so that people don't have to feel alone. They don't have to feel isolated or uncared for. They don't have to be in situations where they have to hide. So I want to open it up, Jill, and I'm going to allow you to share whatever you feel like sharing. But I think that this is a very crucial piece in this conversation that you and I had, is that navigating the life path and the story is not always easy, but it is important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. So the why, the big part of why I do what I do is related to that loss, right? So back in 2009, I did lose my brother to suicide. And so my brother for me he was the protector in a role he didn't have to take on. And he did. And especially when I think about us moving to reserve at the time that we did. It's a pivotal time, kind of that middle school like time frame. you're coming into puberty and all of these, you're so much hormonal change and all of this stuff is happening. And it's that time where you're really looking for acceptance and all of those things, and you're looking to your peers to see where you fit. And I think for me that was, without my brother, I don't know how I would have survived that in the same way that I did, because he was very protective. He would I mean, people his friends would, people would make fun of him for like, how come your little sister's always gotta be like with you? How come you always got your little sister with you? But he didn't care. He was really special at that time. When I look back at it now and I see that in our communities, that the way women were being treated kind of generally wasn't that great. So he was different in that way. He was so good to me. He treated me so well. And he really tried to shield me from a lot of things. And that, especially that kind of lateral violence, that just kind of is, it's able to grow in those environments sometimes, because of this violent disruption that happened to our culture and our way of being and knowing and understanding ourselves and how we fit in the world and all of those things. And so it manifests in not a nice way sometimes, and we know this. And so he did a lot in trying to protect me from that. And so, yeah, I mean, we hung out all the time. We were always together, even to his poor girlfriend's dismay, which he had for all through high school. She was like, "Oh, your sister's coming again." Oh. And he was just like, "Yep, she is." And so we were best friends. And so to lose him, it was after I left. And so that's the thing. I took a lot of that on too, because I moved away from the community. I had my daughter when I was 19. And so I moved out of the community at that time. And I've never moved home since then. And he stayed on reserve, and he stayed there. And I often carry that, that we separated, and what if, right? But of course we can't dwell on that. But it's hard to think that, that relationship just wasn't, the same anymore, just because of physical space, right? Physical distance. But yeah, so I was moved away. So I was not even in the area when he passed, and he took his life on our homestead on the reserve. And it was really, really hard time. I was 29, he was 30, and it had such an impact on me. But the way that I deal with grief is throwing myself into things and just, and so I went back to school. And that's when I went back to school and took the Indigenous governance program between Ryerson and FNCI, that partnership. And it kind of is where it sparked my interest in returning to culture and actually starting to reclaim and getting a better understanding of who I am. And it all makes sense to me. It all fits so well now when I think back on it, right? That path was in front of me, and that's the path I chose at that time, because it helped me actually understand that loss in a different way and understand why he went there, why he was led to that place of thinking that was the option, and so so when I think about the why, I think about him a lot. I think about him a lot, because not just his loss, but what he taught me while he was here, that unconditional love that you expect from your parents. You expect it from that. But for your older brother to just constantly be taking me and making sure I was okay, like he just taught me so much about how to care for the people you love. And like in our language, Ganalungwa kind of gets translated to mean I love you, right? But it's very verb based, it's very action based, right? It's like it's a commitment to care for and protect and to nurture the relationship. If you say that, you are now taking on the responsibility of caring for that person, right? And I feel like he embodied that within our relationship.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, he's a big part of the why, what I do, and why I, and of course I've transitioned into writing is a big part of what I do. And so it allows me to release a lot of this stuff into the world, and I don't have to stand in front of people and do it. I can kind of do it in my own like space and my own time, and then release it when I feel like I'm ready for it to be out there. So it's a newfound way for me to also bridge some of the gaps too, right? That's redressing some of the history that has been unfortunately presented in a way that is inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for that. And this is exactly, why Jill and I connected in such a way, because I almost had the reverse. Although my sister, did not succumb to suicide, my sister was just she lost her battle with medical issues and mental health issues, and I was your brother to my sister, right? And so. Listening to you in that way is what I needed at my time, because you were kind of reciprocating how my brother or how my sister had felt about me, right, in that way. And we had this thing that was happening, but just understanding, and a key point in all of that conversation, in that love that you just expressed, was that through all of this, you, in collaboration with your family member, embarked on a path that fully embodied who you were, right? So even though maybe you weren't doing it separately, like in an individual way, together this collaboration came, and look at what you've created. We all know from our culture and our teachings that life goes on, that there's lots of work that's happening on the other side, just as much as we're doing here. And I often look to my sister as being my co-collaborator in all this, because it was through navigating this stuff that you learn about the beautiful pieces that you have. You learn about the pieces, if we talk about the sweetgrass braid, there's a shiny and a dark. You learn about embodying those darker pieces and knowing that they're part of you. It's part of the process, right? But we don't talk about all this stuff because that's just crazy gobbledygook, right? Like that just, there's a vulnerability and there's a weakness. And so for you to share this here, and just as you shared it with me so many years ago, and then to literally lay it out in the work that you're doing, because you have done, you're right, you're an amazing writer. You are an amazing advocate. I've had the opportunity to work alongside you in many projects here in Collingwood. And you're an amazing storyteller as well. And just sharing those pieces. And it's this voice, it's these voices that need to be heard. It's how we move the needle forward for change, because let's face it, we don't know what we don't know. But we also know on the other side of it that there's a whole other system that has no idea. And
Mhm.
we have to educate them, because it's not about them thinking how we feel anymore, or them thinking or their perception of the conversation. It's about the knowing. And this is the knowing. As uncomfortable, as awkward, as beautiful, as profound, as sad as it may be, this is the pieces of the impact. And so if we're really truly going to stand in collaboration and not repeat patterns and get this right, we need to listen to all of these stories and connect these threads and put together a new piece. So you do write. You are a poet. I am very, very excited to be sharing. And because this is coming out at the end of the month, you just shared this with me, that you are taking on a brand new role here in Collingwood. And I want to open that up to you to kind of let us know, what are the things that Jill is doing right now, and how are you moving all of this beautiful healing and knowledge and understanding forward to create this bigger community for us all to lean into.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's exciting. I am going to be announced by the time this comes out. I will have been announced as Collingwood's new poet laureate. So yeah, I'm very excited about this role, because it's going to give me another platform in order to bring awareness, to educate, to, you know, through the art of poetry, because, and I do love poetry. It's for me been the way in which, because I'm a very, my writing, when I write my articles and things like that, they tend to be always framed in a very hopeful, very forward looking, very, you know, I want people to see that way forward, and I don't want to focus on the things that are causing barriers. But poetry allows me to release some of this, the other side of it, in a very cryptic way, so that
Yeah.
so that I don't, you know, I don't have to display my heart the same way, but I'm still releasing some of that the dark, some of the things that are coming out that need to come out. And so I'm really looking forward to this role, and because in my writing, in my poetry, as well as my writing, I do draw from our teachings, and I draw from the culture, and I draw from our traditional stories a lot. And so they often incorporate relationships to the natural world, and things like that. And so I'm really excited to be able to come from a more Indigenous lens with this poetry, and be able to share that with the broader community. So I think that will give me that, because, as you know, I'm also part of the Unity Collective here in Collingwood, which is, you know, brings together all of the peoples in Collingwood who are people of color, Black, Indigenous people. So and that's been an incredibly rewarding thing for me, because, you know, I did start out my journey, after beginning to reclaim. I really focused on the Indigenous population in the community, and building those relationships, and I continue to do that. So it's only in the last couple of years where I've really been trying to move into more diverse spaces, and seeing how what I have to share, and potentially teach is, you know, it can, there's benefit from that larger community as well, right?
Mhm.
And so we're all looking for those spaces to share our worldviews, and our understandings of how we belong or don't belong, or have been pushed out of spaces. And so, coming back in and just taking up space together has been really powerful. And yeah, I mean, there's teachings from all peoples, right? So we can't just limit ourselves to learning from our own cultures, just as I learn from constantly from my Anishinaabe cousins. I will too learn from my Black and brown cousins as well, right?
Yeah. And
Um,
that is the beauty. And I think that's the turning point um, that is happening in this world right now. Um, because we know the realities, we know the truths, we know that there has been so many marginalized groups that have been impacted by, I'm going to throw the word out there that everybody talks about, by trauma. That's the truth. I call it the truth, right? So everybody, all peoples of the world who walk, have some trauma in their life that when they are exposed to the voice of the indigenous peoples, the Black peoples, all peoples, we have voice to navigate the world as peoples. Creator said that we were all relations. There shouldn't be this segregation, right? But how do we go about it in that way to open the door so that it is that safe space for us all to come forward? Because I, like you, am all about, please tell me, please share with me so I can best honor you. Please, we even talk about our two-spirited and our LGBTQ community. Just, we're all humans. We're all humans, and we all have a story, and we all have an ability to have voice and create a world of unity. And we do need to align. We do need to make change in this way. And it's going to take all of us to do that, because you and I both know that we can have our voice as First Nations peoples. Our Black community can have their voice as Black people, and our Western people can have our Western peoples can have their voice. But again, we're all talking in so many different silos, right? And unfortunately, it's the Western voice that seems to come through because that's what the structure is all built on. But we also realize and understand that there's a lot of Western people out there that are saying, no, I see it, I hear it, I feel it, I want to learn it. But there is, again, how I talked about the T word, there's an F word included in all this, and that is fear. That is fear of not wanting to intimidate, not wanting to impose, not wanting to appropriate, all of these things, right? But in Wijinoki, when we talk about, if you're coming from this place of knowing, understanding, and rooted groundness, and asking questions and showing up in that good way as an ally, then there are ways that we can mix our ways of knowing and learning together in that safe space that are both honorable and respectful, and not have to worry about dipping in. Now, there is another side. We know that, right? We know that side where it's like, no, you can't do that. You're tokenizing. No, we can't do that. And we have these conversations where people are trying to rationalize what they're doing. And then, and some don't even know, because it's so ingrained in them that they aren't even aware. And so when we can show up as strong, confident voices and say, hey, wait a minute, will you consider please doing it this way? Because that's the teachable moment, right? So, and I think that is a gift and a power that you hold as well, that you can show up in these areas and say, well, this is a part of who I am, and I want to learn a part of who you are, and then I want to learn how we can walk the path together. And you use that with your voice, you use it with your poetry, you use it with just the interactions that you have, and you use it in the constant return to self. because you always come back to that piece of who am I? Where did I come from? Why is it important? And how do I belong in all this?
Yeah. And one of the things that I do, that I'm pretty proud of myself for, because I used to be a very closed off person and very like shy. I got called shy, and then somebody said that's not shy, that's oppression.
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah, it's probably true. But I say yes to a lot of people who reach out to me because of an article I wrote or whatever, and say, hey, I'd really like to get together and go for a walk outside and just talk to you. I'd like to sit and have a tea with you. And I say yes, as long as I feel safe in doing so. I say yes. And the amount of conversations I've had in this community because of that, and it's because I need to know that there are people out there that I'm actually having an impact on, and that are actually open to hearing these different perspectives. And so I go out and I do that, and it's been one of the most rewarding and empowering parts of what I do. Because we know how important relationship is, of course, in everything, every aspect.
Fundamental. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I try very hard to nurture relationships everywhere I can. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And I'm a yes girl as well. And just because if it feels right, right? And when when you're, a lot of people will say to me, hey, are you okay? Like, are you doing, like, maybe you shouldn't. It's like, no, I know when where I need to be, because I've connected, I'm surrendering to how do I grow? I walk with Creator every day and say, okay, how are we co-collaborating today? And however it comes up, it comes up. I have to praise my daughter because she's doing really good work out east. And she said to me whenever, through the pathway, she said, Mama, you got 2 things to do in a day in your lifetime. And I was like, okay, tell me about that. I want to hear about this. And she said, you protect and you teach. And if you can apply those 2 things throughout your world, and that was shared to her from another elder who's walking, this world just like we are. That seems heavy sometimes because this work's not easy. And working on ourselves personally is not easy. But if you can wrap it around, okay, how am I protecting and who am I protecting? And is this protecting me? And how am I teaching and how am I being taught? It's a cycle, it's a circle, it's reciprocal, right? It's not a one and done. It's not, we don't show up and say, oh, look at me, look what I'm doing. And this is so special. You and I and quite a few of us might, speak to the projects that we do. But I bet you there's another 50 projects behind the scenes that people have no idea about that we're part of, because that's the work that we're doing, right? That's the beauty of what comes here. And it's not about, ego has nothing to do with it. It's simply about opening your voice. And again, I love that you said, oh, I used to be shy, or no, I wouldn't do that. No, that was oppression, because that's very much what it was. Is that, when we start to open our voice, really beautiful things come about. And it's just, they're meant to be here. So I say, keep going, keep spreading, and keep sharing, and keep saying yes if it feels right. And creating this container. And again, that's why whenever I was dreaming this segment up, it was like, okay, who do I need? Who do I need? And I sat with that, and I knew that you were one of the voices to build that thread for the future. So I have a little list here before we go, because I know your time is precious just as much as mine is. I have one more thing on my list before we wrap things up. And that would be, what are two things that we as a community, as a collaborative, as First Nations, as humans, as peoples, need to bring forward to really grow this container of collaboration and of change from your perspective, from your community here, or from your worldly view?
Okay. So I think one, slow down. Slow down. I think that we need to take more time in building those foundations of relationship first. Because and I did this with the town of Collingwood. We actually did a presentation together collaboratively around how we ended up where we were, creating what we did for the Day for Truth and Reconciliation this past fall. Because somebody said, this was such a beautiful thing, you know, how did you guys get here? And it was like, I had, you know, we presented this idea of, you know, we took a lot of time to build the relationship first, a lot of conversations and a lot of just sitting together, working on things together, whatever that looked like. But it was a slow process. So by the time that project came along, it actually came together quite quickly because all of that other work was done. We understood each other. We were starting in a place where we felt very confident and comfortable in our relationship. So I say that number one, slow down and allow the relationship to be nurtured and to grow organically. Number two, let's see, I guess I would say be witness to the matriarch rising.
Right?
Yes.
Speak to that a little bit more, because a lot of people will say, what's she talking about? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, because I think, you know, I'm wearing this shirt, right? It's my land back shirt.
Yep.
And you know, land back for me, it's not like we want our land back. It's part of rematriation. It's part of understanding that our Mother Earth needs to be prioritized in a way that makes life sustainable. Right? It's very basic concepts and ideas. Women are life bearers. We need to be treated well. We are sacred. You know, all people are sacred, but the life-bearing abilities of women is incredibly sacred. The waters, who we as Indigenous people think of as a feminine entity, right? All of that. So we need to get back to that, right? And I think women, as women, we are the voice of the water. We're the voice of the land, and so we need to be taking up space and taking up those places where we've been pushed out. And we need, you know, that's part of our reclamation, is returning back to our natural and sacred roles as women. And we need to be allowed to do that. All peoples need to lift us up and allow us to do that, because it's only going to create a healthier world for all of us.
100%. And, you know, for a lot of people that, you know, probably may not even be aware, because this comes up inside of our program too. A lot of people didn't realize that, you know, for a lot of First Nations and Indigenous peoples, it was a matriarchal structure that was set up. Our women were held, exactly like you said, in places of power, in giving life, in leading, in being in these pivotal roles inside of our own. I know Jeff doesn't want to call it our clan systems, but you know, right? Yeah. But you know, it's true, and I didn't realize the full magnitude of this until I started retracing my steps. So all I had to go on, you know, because my grandmother married a Western man, she had to sign off all rights to anything on the island. As a result of that, it stopped her voice. She did not share with her own children anything about traditions, culture, nothing. Created a new set of cultures in a new world until those grandbabies were born. And I was really fortunate that I had this amazing relationship with my man, that she, as I look back now, realized she was giving me the indigenous nuggets. I just didn't even know what it was, right? And it took somebody saying to me in my coming back stage, I can't teach you because you already have what you know. You need to turn it on. And I was like, what? What the hell are you talking about? Because we go through that stage when we're trying to reconnect and find out who our why is. And I get that now. I 100% get it, because the moment that I started to that I came back home and connected, I realized all this stuff was in me, and all those nuggets that she had shared have opened up. And then as you're working with your healers and your people, and you're in ceremony and you're in community, and you realize, oh my goodness gracious, it was the colonialized system that walked in here so many years ago and said, no, it's a patriarchal. It's not the matriarchal, right? And so we're going to go by the father, the grandfather. So no wonder I'm bumping up against pieces that I can't find my pieces, because all of that was removed. Right? So when you say this rising is happening, it really truly is, in that, indigenous peoples know how important it is, how important women are, right? But just growing into that and knowing, wow, like we have an ability to really share. I don't want to use the power word, because I know that is kind of triggering and harmful for some. But when I say power, I speak to my own personal power and the knowing of who I am, and who she is, and everything that I do today. Oh my gosh, it just is full of Grandma Bertha. It's full of my sister. It's full of all of these roots.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's us women, with the Haudenosaunee people. Like for us, it was us women who took care of and cared for the seeds. We did the planting. We did all of that stuff. And when we were put in residential schools, they put all of the boys out in the fields and doing that gardening and the harvesting and all of the things that was traditionally part of our responsibilities. And so I see that in my community, where seed keepers are now coming together and recreating what we've been told was the man's domain, which is so silly, because that's who we were. We were the ones who nurtured those gardens and made those.
Yeah. And that is such a beautiful, it's because of, we often speak of 7 generations before us and 7 generations ahead of us. When we take a look at that, that's approximately 520 years, everybody. Okay. And so if we're standing in this place right here and we're looking back, I know that our ancestors went through so much, but I here today feel so honored that, like you said, we're working through the stuff, we're carrying the flame, we're rising up, we're changing it, we're putting it back to the ways that it was, and creating that understanding so that, God forbid, this never happens again, ever in that way. I know what it was that I wanted to talk to you about, because you and I talked about this before. We talked about the fact that, so inside of the program, in the morning, we talk about all of the beautiful pieces of life and connection, and how that can be enveloped in a medicine wheel. We know that it's not that way across, but that's the anchor that I use to teach, because it also opens the doorway in the afternoon to tear apart the medicine wheel and really show people and put people inside of the experience of what it would feel like and what it felt like for First Nations peoples to have gone through all of that trauma of colonization. We talk about residential schools. We talked about Indian day schools, and we talked about the 60s scoop. And you and I had a little conversation before here that, kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I didn't even begin to think that we would have this conversation. But I'm going to just open it. You actually are impacted by the day school program, correct?
Yes. When I went to, I guess, middle school, like on reserve, that was a federally run school. So it was considered a day school. And that kind of blew my mind too, because at the time I really didn't know, but certainly some of those aspects, especially when I think back to your conversation with Jeff and speaking to just this idea that there was very low expectations of us. There were, there was almost this assumption that we were going to fail or not do well. And that definitely was a huge impact on me. And I internalized that. Absolutely. I spent so much of my time trying to prove, as I got older and old enough to be on my own, that no, I'm not stupid. I'm not these things. I won't, and the way I saw to prove that was again through that Western idea of success. And so I had to go to college, and then I had to, I didn't mention, but I was a public servant for 13 years with the federal government.
Yeah.
So I went through that process of having to undo a lot of what going to school there did, when the authorities are kind of like, yeah, it's okay, we don't expect much of you anyway.
Key point right there. Right?
Yeah.
And thank God for Jeff bringing that up last week, because it opened up this conversation that we're having today. And this is a conversation that I advocate for inside of the program, as far as the healthcare that we seek. We know that our peoples are profiled, that limitations are put on us before we even come through the door. That's still happening.
Yes.
It's still happening in the education system.
Mm-hmm.
Our children are still going to school on island or reserve, and then coming across in the mainstream and not knowing where they fit.
Yeah.
I work in community here, and I have Indigenous students that are here, and they don't understand where they belong. And it opens that narrative of, I'm not enough. Doesn't matter. I won't ever achieve what you're going to achieve. So this is still happening. And this is why I wanted to bring that conversation up in here. So for all the people's watching, this is another writer downer. How do we make sure that we are providing the change, the awareness, the understanding, and the shift to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen? Because as you mentioned, Jill, you're in your 40s. A lot of people that I've talked to on here are older. And we've come to accept or acknowledge as society that, yeah, that fits the timeline. But the truth and the reality is that the timeline has gone farther than we could have ever imagined.
Yeah. And it varies from community to community.
It does. It does. Absolutely. Oh, I don't want to stop, but I know we got.
I know I can go on forever.
I know. I am so proud of you. I am so thankful for you. I am so grateful to have you as a fellow Quay, rising up in our community, and I'm proud of Collingwood. I really am. They've done some. They've done amazing work, and I'm really proud of all of the roads that have got us here. you're part of that. You know, if I hadn't met you way back when through the Collingwood connection, I wouldn't have found myself to feather carriers. Then I wouldn't have found myself to Mom Away. And then I wouldn't have had the opportunity to develop this program in this way that speaks to all of the mainstream organizations and say, hey, listen, let's have these conversations. I know they're uncomfortable, but we have to have them to change. And then that wouldn't have led me to having each of you showing up here and being so open, vulnerable, and special. And Miigwech, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I look forward to future meetings. I look forward to future experiences, and I cannot wait to see all of the things that are coming out of the Jillian Morris house here in Collingwood. So till next time, Bella, we will see you. Bama P. Thank you to everybody watching, and we'll see you next time.